Nau mai hoki mai e hoama. Welcome back to this next session. E ki ana, which is titled Key Relationships in Collaboration in the Learner Journey. So it is my privilege to introduce a very familiar face, a friend, Ian Funnell from NZQA, as well as Craig Langdon from Mukatangata WDC. Both are co-chairs of Te Rāngai Ohu Mahi Pairewa Ako me Te Mātauranga Āmotu, Skills Standards and National Curriculum Working Group. Tēnei te mi atu ki a kōrua, and I will hand the time over to you now.
Well, kia ora tātou, and kia ora Lee. Ko Ian Funnell tōku ingoa, he kai whakahaere mo te wahanga kaupapahiri tāwahi ki te mana tohu mātou ronga au Aotearoa. Kia ora everyone, I'm Ian Funnell, and I'm the Acting Manager of the Policy and International team here at NZQA. And I'm very pleased to be here today, along with my co-chair and co-presenter Craig Langdon, to share with you a brief overview of Te Rongai Ohu Mahi Pariwa Ako me Te Marautanga Ramotu, our sector working group for designing skill standards and national curricula.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Craig Langdon tōku ingoa, and I'm the General Manager Qualifications and Standards at Mukatangata Workforce Development Council. And as Ian said, I'm the co-chair on this working group, and really looking forward to discussing the mahi that we have been doing. At this point, I'd like to acknowledge the support of my colleagues in the 5 other Workforce Development Councils who are contributing their expertise and showing leadership on this project as well. So kia ora team. Next slide, please.
Back one slide, please.
Thank you. Back one. There we go. Excellent. So WDCs have actually just had our 6-month anniversary, having stood up in October. So birthday presents, please. We are all definitely still building capacity, and there is a lot of mahi happening with a particular focus on building relationships with providers, with iwi Māori, with industry. But we recognise the importance of this project and agreed to co-design these sample products with NZQA. So WDCs were set up, as I'm sure you're aware, to fulfill a number of functions. Most pertinent to this presentation are the responsibility to develop and maintain skill standards and national curricula. Now, the eagle-eyed amongst you would have noted the quotation marks around national curricula, and this is an indication that the working group is still exploring what might be a more appropriate operational name for this educational product. The issue is not with the term national, it's more with the term curricula, which is a slightly loaded word. So we're working through that. So over to you, Ian.
Kia ora, Craig. So yeah, we've heard a lot about collaboration and relationship building today already. And on the slide there, you'll see that one of NZQA's key roles over the past year has been to support the setting up of workforce development councils. So in addition to contributing to the work of TEC's establishment unit last year, myself and a colleague, Jen Cooper, were nominated by NZQA as dedicated relationship managers for workforce development councils. As Craig said, they're 6 months in operation. I think we left it all of a month before we went to pay them a visit and catch up at Craig's invite. But we met with all of the WDC qualifications and quality assurance general managers in November. And that gave us the opportunity to, I guess, outline our supporting and quality assurance role, but also to set out the range of collaborative work that we and WDCs needed to do together. And this work included things like we're talking about today with developing skill standards and national curricula, but also reviewing micro-credentials for the RoVE environment, co-designing the quality assurance framework with WDCs and what that would look like moving forward, gathering WDC input into some critical reviews underway, the review of the New Zealand qualifications framework, but also moving into our evaluative quality assurance framework as well, gathering WDC input into Aramatawa and the principles of assessment, and also just discussing the general support that NZQA could provide to WDCs during their setup and development phase. So clearly there was a lot to do, and we agreed pretty early that the priority was really co-designing these 2 education products, or starting that process, that would help simplify New Zealand qualifications, support the objectives of RoVE, and ultimately Next slide, please.
So a key component of a simplified qualifications and credential system is the development of these two new educational products, skill standards and national curricula. So if we focus on skill standards, so currently vocational programs of learning may be learning outcome based, or they might be unit standard based. And the intent is for vocational education programs, which are leading to New Zealand qualifications, to use skill standards. And this will provide employers and learners with consistency of learning, and also importantly enable learners to move more easily between modes of delivery and providers. In contrast with the unit standards, skill standards will have specific learning outcomes and levels of performance. They'll be developed by WDCs in collaboration with industry, providers and other interested parties, and over time they will replace unit standards. So shifting to national curricula, so as well as qualifications and skill standards, we believe there's an opportunity for this additional educational product to give guidance and information to providers to ensure a greater consistency of graduate skill across Aotearoa. It's very important to note that these national curricula would only be developed with agreement from key participants such as industry and providers, and only where there are mutually beneficial outcomes. WDCs will facilitate a collaborative national curriculum development process to ensure the practical needs of industry and the critical perspective of educators are met. Next slide, please.
So when we were thinking about setting up Taronga Ohu Mahi, we knew that these two education products would need to meet the needs of a wide range of groups, including learners, whānau, iwi, hapu, communities, employers, tertiary education organisations and schools. And we also knew that the working group needed to be thinking about equity of outcomes for all ākonga. As a result, we wanted to ensure we had a diverse group that could represent the wide range of contexts and audiences for skill standards and national curricula. So we started thinking about putting the group together. So we've got around 30 to 35 people on the group actually, and we've got all the general managers from each WDC on board, as well as other key WDC kaimahi, some of whom are here today. And we've got educators, workplace learning experts, as well as peak body representatives from the tertiary education sector, schools and kura. We've also got members with expertise in education delivery for Maori, Pacific, and learners with disabilities. So it's fair to say the group's become quite large. We've set ourselves a busy schedule of work, and we're meeting every fortnight through regular 3-hour virtual hui over a 3 to 4 month period, of which we're about halfway through currently. We've had some excellent choreo to date, initially focusing on developing design principles for skill standards, and we're starting to develop sample standards from across the various WDC industries. In terms of design principles, we've been exploring just recently how the design of skill standards could be informed by ngā matapono that formed Te Honua Te Kahurangi, which is a Mātauranga Māori framework that was gifted to NZQA in 2012. And we're seeing some really good alignment in ngā matapono. For example, for rangatiratanga, one of the design principles for skill standards could be that they'll support and empower industries, employers and communities to build a sustainable quality workforce. We've definitely got a lot more mahi to go within this group, and we're only sort of giving a brief overview here, but we'll soon be in a position to engage more broadly as group members start to share our design principles and samples with their industries, communities of practice and educator colleagues. And we're also planning to engage with a variety of subsectors via specific information sessions before there'll be a formal consultation process on skill standards and national curricular templates and the rules that will enable these new products to come into being. And that will take place later in the year. Over to you, Craig.
Next slide, please. Thank you. So the important stuff, the impact on the learner journey, and we are firmly of the belief that the development and equally importantly, the implementation of these two products will have a positive effect on the learner journey. So one key factor is the consistency of vocational training with the use of these products, which will contribute to the creation of a more coherent qualifications and credentials landscape. So another critical factor is the ability for learners to move more easily between regions, between providers, modes of learning, employment situations. So as an example, if we consider a learner who shifts from learning on job and full-time employment in Auckland to perhaps moving to Dunedin and splitting their learning to part-time on job and part-time on campus study. So at the moment, that's quite a difficult transition, but with these new educational products, there'll be a minimum, that they will minimize disruption to the learner during this transition. So that's quite an exciting and transformational change, which will have a significantly positive effect on the learner journey. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Craig. So just remains to be said, Craig and I would just like to thank you for the opportunity to share our mahi with you. And we'd also like to thank all the working group members, some of whom are in the audience today, for their contribution and commitment to this crucial collaborative development. We really appreciate it's quite a substantial sort of time commitment. And if you're keen to find out more about Te Rangai Ahu Mahi, you can please check out the links here and the slide, and the PowerPoint will be available, or send us a question, and you can also subscribe to receive regular updates. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Kia ora.
Ka pai. O tēnā kōrua I tā kōrua kōrero. Thank you again for both your time and your presentation this afternoon. There are a number of questions that have popped up which are directed at you both, but we will save that for the end of the session because I'm very aware that we have one more presenter as part of our time. So I do want to give her the time to do that kōrero, but know that we will come back to some of these questions if we do have that time at the end of the session. Ka pai. So it is now my privilege to introduce Morgan Healy. Morgan Healy is the Manager for Ōritetanga Learner Success at the Tertiary Education Commission. The team is responsible for supporting the organisation to deliver on equitable outcomes for all learners at a system level. Nā reira, Morgan, kei a koe te wā.
Kia ora koutou, ko Morgan Healy tōku ingoa, hei kahima aho ki te amarangi maturanga matua. I'm Morgan Healy, and I'm the manager of the Ōritetanga Learner Success team at the TEC. I often describe Ōritetanga and my team as a small but mighty one of passionate and long-standing TEC members. So we have the privilege and the honor of thinking about how we can change the tertiary system to deliver for all learners and achieve equity. So I'm going to briefly talk you through some of our work, and in particular, our focus on increasing sector capability to put, as Minister Hipkins said this morning, learners at the heart of our operating model. Next slide, please. So the TEC has a vision. Every person has the skills, knowledge, and confidence to create a fulfilling life. Every person. The government's goal is to achieve equity for all tertiary learners in terms of participation and achievement. And a key priority for RoVE and the new entities is to address inequities, especially for Māori, Pacific, and disabled learners. And this is fundamental to us, the Crown, in terms of honouring our Titiriti o Waitangi commitments. We therefore need a tertiary education system which works for everyone. And while arguably it isn't at the moment and probably was never designed to, we're in the midst of a series of transformational programs, RoVE being probably the biggest we've seen in 30 years, that aims to change this, to ensure learners in their whānau, business and industry, iwi and community groups, and learners, both nationally and regionally, have a tertiary education system that's not just fit for purpose, but working in harmony to produce healthy and confident citizens for the future. As we've heard today, RoVE is creating a strong, unified, sustainable system for all vocational education that delivers the skills that learners, employers, and communities need to thrive. A key goal is for learners, particularly those underserved by the system, to get the educational and employment outcomes from vocational education and training that's responsive to their needs. And this is where my team's mahi intersects with RoVE. Next slide, please. So no Ōritetanga presentation would be complete if we didn't have at least one data slide to inform our argument around the why the system needs to change. So the graph's a little bit out of date, but it does show the trend in qualification completions for Māori, Pacific, and non-Māori and non-Pacific learners at level 4 to 7 non-degree. And this is just provider-based. It doesn't include any of the Taito information. So while we've seen a steady increase in overall completions, the equity gap has actually gotten worse in the last couple of years. And part of the reforms and why we're all here today is reflected back to us. Our former VET system wasn't working well for learners, and for that matter, industry, communities, iwi, regions, and businesses. So how do we become the change we want to see? Next slide. For the TEC, equity requires all parts of the system working together to reverse patterns of attrition and to design systems and processes around the learner and their whānau. To achieve this, we've designed a work program that focuses on shifting the entire system to be learner-centric. We need to ensure that everything the TEC does is focused on delivering successful outcomes for learners through our investment, our careers, and our monitoring functions. That we have the internal capability to design, develop, and implement more learner-centric, equity-minded, and culturally affirming policies, services, and products. But we can't do this on our own. We want to work with employers and iwi and communities so you can inform and influence the relevance of tertiary education. With WDCs and RSLGs, we will now be in a better place than ever to do that. We also need capable providers who take an intentional and whole of organization approach to learner success. Organizations who have intentionally designed their operating model around the learner. If I could whittle down what I've learned in this role over the last couple of years, it would be that the system is broken. That's the problem, not the learners within it. We often use this quote, but I think it still resonates. We've been so obsessed with finding ways to resuscitate the canaries that we have failed to examine the integrity of the mine shaft itself. Next slide. So if we're focused on interrogating the mine shaft, we need to understand what a solid, sustainable mine looks like. And that starts with understanding who our learners are. There are many different learners in our tertiary education system. Their lived realities and experiences can be messy, and they intersect in ways that can make participation and success difficult, if and only if we expect them to neatly slot into existing structures. So let's meet two learners. Araha is in her second year studying business communications. She's a solo mom with a 2-year-old son. While Araha studies, her son is looked after by her mom, who has some health issues. John is in his first year. He's lost his job during the last COVID lockdown in Auckland. John's first in his family to participate in higher learning, and he's finding it hard to adjust to a structured learning environment. What do the learner personas tell us about the system that we need to create? As the reforms have shown, we need more opportunities for work-based and hands-on practical learning. Consistency of the programs and the transferability of them could be really important to John as he thinks about where he goes to next. But what does first in family mean for the kinds of holistic student support and pathways support John might need? Are there additional co-requisite or tutorial support that John will need to successfully complete his qualification? And how has John been supported to think about his learning pathway? For Araha, we know her caring responsibilities for her son and helping to manage mom's health will likely take priority over study. What timetable will work for her? Can part of her studies be done online to reduce travel times, particularly if and when her mom's not well? Are there financial barriers to having her take time off from work while studying? Have these been discussed with her? Having systems and processes that are designed to ask and answer these types of questions are fundamental to give learners the support they need to be successful. Historically, our systems have not been designed around the Arahas and the Johns. And for us, equity means to allocate resources and opportunities based on specific needs to achieve greater fairness of treatment and outcomes. To achieve this kind of fairness, we need each part of the system and each organization within it to fully commit to putting learners at the center of everything that we do. Next slide, please. At the moment, one of our key priorities is to work with the TEOs to implement a whole of organization learner success approach. We know changing an operating model is a multi-year process, so we've designed some tools to make this easier for providers. The TEC has designed and tested a learner success framework to give TEOs a blueprint for change. It's based on evidence from international and local best practice, and a nod to our colleagues at Te Pukenga for helping us trial and test parts of the framework in its infancy, and the work they continue to do to understand and deliver to their learners. Underpinning the framework are 7 capabilities which drive the cultural shifts that are needed. To become a learner-centric organization, you need strengths in all 7, but today I want to focus on 3. People, culture, and leadership. So this is the commitment and accountability of the TEO's leadership with respect to learner success and the clarity of vision for desired change. Change must be owned and driven from the top. This year, and for this reason, we're focusing on supporting the development of council-owned learner success plans across the TEIs in particular. So we want to see a whole of organization commitment to learner success. Guided pathways. So this is the deliberate design of clear and relevant educational pathways from first engagement through to employment. Knowing which programs are endorsed by WDCs, for instance, will be important in informing which pathways learners can choose from and where that will lead them. Partnership, the development and support of partnership between the TEOs and their learners, employers, industry, whānau, iwi and hapu, community groups and schools. No TEO is an island. They exist within regions and social and community structures that are vital to supporting learners. We also know that we can't expect providers to be able to deliver all services a learner might need. Equally important is ensuring learners are partners in decision-making, and their voices are present and listened to as part of that decision-making. We are in a unique position. Oh, sorry, next slide. We're in a unique position with Te Pukenga, RSLGs, WDCs, and Te Taumata Aranui to collectively implement a vocational system that's designed to address inequities. Our learner success approach supports and enhances this work. By working together, we can achieve more equitable outcomes for all learners and position Aotearoa New Zealand's tertiary education system as a world leader in learner success. Next slide, please. With great change and the power we all hold as leaders in the system comes great responsibility and accountability. This is our moment, so let's make the most of it. Ngā mihi nui.
Ngā mihi nui ki a koe, Megan. Morgan, mo tō kōrero I tēnei o ngā rā. Thank you for your time, Morgan. We really appreciate that. And actually, I'm going to bring our first 2 presenters back into the space because even though we are right on time, so ka pai, must acknowledge you presenters, and particularly Ori Te Tanga, I think of Paola Munson, so ka mihi atu rā ki a koe taku rangatira if you're watching, tēnā koe. But I do have time for one part-time. And we're getting the hang of upvotes or liking, which is great. So we have a key part-time here. And potentially this might be for you, Craig or Ian. Is there potential for WDCs to have a stronger role in developing micro-credentials in the future?
Yes, I can answer that one. So yes, there absolutely is. Micro-credentials are an important part of WDC mahi moving forward. It's a situation with quite a few moving parts. If you think that legislation changes soon will mean that training schemes will cease to exist and all training schemes will pivot into be micro-credentials, as well as the shift for micro-credentials to become closer to qualifications. So there will be an ability for WDs to set a national micro-credential and providers will apply for accreditation to deliver that one. So absolutely there is, but there's a lot of moving parts. We're working very closely with NZQA about how it's going to evolve and be operationalized. But to answer your question, absolutely.
Ka pai. We've probably answered a few of the questions through your kōrero today. One of the key ones is how can they engage, particularly with the work that you are currently doing. So I believe that there are links, or you have talked about how they may come and be a part of that. So again, encourage this collaboration and this connecting, which is all why we're here today. So Ian, Craig, Morgan, again, thank you for your time as part of the session. Ka nui te mihi atu ki a kōrua o tira ki a koutou. Tēnā koutou katoa.